Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's installment of the Talking Tim webinar series. My name is Kevin Vita, and I'll be helping facilitate today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration and hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, also known as NOCoE. As a quick reminder, NOCoE offers a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. Let me cover a quick few logistical items for today's webinar. All of the attendees are in listen-only mode by default, but we'd like you to stay engaged by using the chat box for identifying yourself and the agency you represent, as well as any additional comments and questions you have during today's presentations. At the end of the presentations, we will have a Q&A session. The questions will be read out loud one at a time by the moderator, and our presenters will answer the questions as they come in. I also would like to state that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording and the slide deck will be available on the NOCoE website within a few days. That's all I have. So with that, I'll hand it over to our moderator, Joe Tebo, to start us off.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks to NOCoE for the continued support, great support for Talking Tim and the other functions that we have. So welcome, everybody. I'm watching the attendee list, see lots of longtime great Tim champions, maybe some new folks, and welcome to you all, and thanks for all that you do for traffic incident management. I think you'll enjoy today's program. We've got some great information to share with you, some great speakers. So next, this is our disclaimer. And just before I get into that, Kevin, I need to ask you a technical question. Am I the only one seeing these black boxes on the screen?
No, you're not the only one.
Okay, then I feel better. Yeah, this is the U.S. government's disclaimer. You'll likely to see products and items within our speakers' content. We don't promote anything. We're not selling anything. But you're seeing it because it's what's out there and it's what's being used. And so there you have that. We just don't have a policy to promote, but it's there. So next, if you would. Here's today's run of the show here. You've got me. We're going to have UAS training and ops for Tim. As you can see, we got some great folks from Texas, great team here from Texas. You're really going to enjoy what they have for operations and Tim for drone as first responder. We'll have Jason Day, we'll have Aaron Fritch, and we'll also give you the highlights for the EDC7 UAS workshop a little later on in the program. If time permits, we'll be substituting Jim Austrich for Katie Belmore on that one. So we just didn't get a chance to update that. And then give an opportunity for questions and answers with our presenters. You please use the chat, the Q&A portion or the chat. And yeah, let's get it going. Next slide. The responder line of duty deaths and training updates. We're going to cover that. Crash Responder Safety Week, of course. Hopefully that's on your calendar and you're making your arrangements. Don't forget those proclamations. November 18th to the 22nd. And we'll have a brief demo when the Tim responder training refresh. We'll have some good words, encouraging words on the Tim self-assessment that's coming up for 2024. And next Talking Tim, of course, third Wednesday of every month, we're going to talk about the incentivized towing programs that are out there with our towing and recovery partners. There's the note down there that to sign up for our newsletter and Talking Tim webinars. There's a couple of QR codes there. Get opportunity to grab your phone, scan those, and sign up for those for the newsletter if you haven't already. Great information there. So let's start this, kick us off with the line of duty deaths. And as of the 24th of last month, we're showing 22. That's the courtesy and the work from Emergency Responder Safety Institute. If you're not familiar with them, please Google them, get in there, sign up, take their courses. They have a great system there to record struck bys, non-fatal struck bys, equipment strikes. So we need to accumulate that data. We really ask for your help in doing that, amongst all the other duties that you'll have to do in an event like that. Please take the time to do that so we can get a better picture, because we know there's a huge story to be told behind the non-fatal struck bys and the apparatus and equipment strikes. There's lessons to be learned there all the way around. So please take the opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, our law enforcement partners are taking the blunt of it, and with our towing and recovery folks not far behind. Um, Traffic incident management saves lives every day. We do everything we can. We need to get the motorists and the motoring public to get on board with us and to slow down and move over and pay attention, not be a D driver. So there's where we are with the line of duty deaths. So far this year, we've got slightly under 6 months to go. So hopefully we'll hold tight and there'll be zero for the rest of the year. We can only pray. Next. The TIM responder training status, you look at that from first of the year till 1st of July, 34.2 thousand TIM trained reports have been recorded. So, that's outstanding. Promoting the TIM training, together we all save lives. But when you look to the right side there, the train-to-trainer sessions, 603 sessions with 15,200 participants. 23% of the participants have actually, to our knowledge, have provided training, and that's something like 4,000 or so folks out of the trainers. So, pick it up, get going with it, right? Join with your partners to get multi-discipline training going. The in-person training, 23,000 sessions, 525,000 participants, great efforts all the way across the board. The web-based training, that's where we are with the 114.3 from National Highway Institute, another 16,003 from other approved and TIM training programs. ERSI has 55, almost 55.5 from the ERSI, from the Responder Safety and Learning Institute and network. So, I mean, if you're not familiar with the NHI program, with the ERSI program, please take a few minutes to do that. If you're new to the programs, start knocking out those free modules, and educate yourself, get that foundational knowledge going, and encourage others to do the same. So with 727,200 folks trained, we're well on our way to that million or 1.2 or 1.4 goal that we have. And we also understand it's a revolving door, right? So folks who took the training, folks get promoted, folks change corporations, disciplines, and so forth. So it's a journey without a destination, so to speak, although our destination is zero deaths. But nonetheless, it's an ongoing effort, because we're picking them up and we're losing them kind of at the same time, or comparable anyway. So let's push that training. Let's get the folks trained and promote it every opportunity that you get. Next. Okay, so Crash Responder Safety Week. I'm going to turn this over to Vishali Shaw, who many of you know from AEM, one of our great contractors, support contractors for the TIM program. Vishali, welcome, and thank you for your time, and take it away.
Thank you, Joe. So most of you already know that Crash Responder Safety Week is a federal highway administration sponsored initiative that communicates the simple steps that everyone can take to keep roadway responders and the traveling public safe in and around traffic incidents. Crash Responder Safety Week targets three multiple audiences: the traveling public, TIM responders and leaders, and governmental officials. Next slide. And what we hope to do is use this week to better inform and make aware all of these stakeholders on the importance of safe, quick clearance and their respective roles. So one of the things we do is we identify a theme each year. And that theme is, first of all, what's the right word, processed through the National Crash Responder Safety Week Committee. And then we market the themes to identify the final choice. And so you may see a poll question that has already come up, and we've sort of moved around the potential themes, but I'm going to go ahead and read them to you, and we'd love your feedback. What theme are you gravitating towards amongst the 5 that are offered? First one on the poll says, responders ahead, reduce your speed as you proceed. The second one is, do your part to protect roadside responders. The third one on the poll is, stay alert, slow down, move over. Responders are relying on you. That's an expansion from a theme from about 3 years ago. And then we have the more social media directed move over challenge, hashtag move over challenge, be the change for responder safety. And then a simpler one, be the change, champion responder safety. So those are the 5. We'd love you to pick whichever one you gravitate towards. And if you have another idea you want the FHWA and the National CRSW Committee to consider, please enter it in that second box or the second question. So we'll give you guys a few seconds, and then we'd love to see or share the response at the next Talking Tim and debut the theme. So we'll give it about 15 more seconds for you guys to help us down select the theme for 2024. All right, next slide. So the next all-state planning webinar, the second one, will be held August 14th at 3 p.m. on NOCoE. We'll go ahead and put in the registration link momentarily in the chat. The all-state webinars are focused on all of the response associations that are planning for Crash Responder Safety Week. And specifically, we like to engage the communications or the public information officer, because they have a very critical role in helping promote CRSW, whether through social media messaging or through internal and external newsletters or through press releases or many other mechanisms. So please mark your calendar for August 14th for the webinar. So next, I think one thing we wanted to show is the excitement. Last year we had 22 proclamations from state governors, and our goal is 25. So we need just 3 more states along with the 22 that were able to secure a proclamation last year. Next slide. And with that, I will turn it over to the TIM Responder Training Team. And if you have any questions for Crash Responder Safety Week, our illustrious Jim Austrich is on the webinar today, and he will be leading all of the efforts for Crash Responder Safety Week from the FHWA side. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, back to me. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Thank you, Vishali. Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump in and give a quick update. Kevin, could you let me take control of the screen? Thank you. So we wanted to give a quick update on the status of the National TIM Responder Training Program materials. We know that this is something that people are looking for, and so the materials are out there. So I just wanted to really quickly show people where they can get those. Let me give you guys the I lost my chat box. Well, I'll send you guys the link once I'm done sharing. So all of the materials are now, oh, there we go. Let me give this to you guys. So that is the link to the site that we're looking at. So this is where the materials are posted. So anybody that has completed a Train the Trainer program, or anybody that is supporting a TIM, one of the state's TIM training programs, can have an account here. You can log in. And if you go to the training materials, you'll see that we have 3 different folders at the top. The one that everybody I think is looking for is a responder training program. So this is version 4 of the materials. Right now, what is up on the website is the 3 different PowerPoints. So we have the responder training, that's their traditional 4-hour training. We now have an instructor-led virtual version of the training that provides additional prompting and facilitates providing the training virtually. And then we also have the Train the Trainer PowerPoint along with the TIM Train the Trainer guide. So Jim is working on an outreach email that will go out today to all the state points of contact with some directions. We're just asking states to let us know how they want to do outreach to their individual trainers by next Tuesday. And then next Wednesday, for all of the states that want FHWA to handle the outreach, we're going to send out an email announcing these materials are available to everyone that has gone through a Train the Trainer session that we still have an active email for. We'll give them instructions for accessing the website. And then they'll be able to download that. And then by next Wednesday, we'll have the additional materials. We're just finalizing the updated certificate, the announcement, and a couple of those supplemental materials. You'll see all those up there. But we certainly didn't want those to stop people from getting online and downloading the PowerPoint. So we've been promising it. We're very apologetic that it took a little bit longer than we had hoped. But please go download it. Last word of caution, it is very large. These files are 1.5 gigabytes. So you might have to, it will take a minute to download them depending on the speed of your internet. So it's there, go get it, start using it. So that's all for me, Joe.
Outstanding. Yeah, yay.
Yay.
Right, yay. Thank you, Katie.
Sure.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Great stuff. We finally got it out there and get it going. So use it. Get out there and use it. And yeah, so next up on the agenda is another good TIM champion and friend of the program, and Brian Purvis from AECOM, one of our support consultants, and a longtime TIM champion. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about the TIM self-assessments that are coming up. So Brian, thank you for your time, and take it away.
All right, I appreciate it, Joe. So next slide. So it has been delayed. So I feel your pain, Katie, but we did not technically have a 2023 traffic incident management self-assessment. So what we've done is we've decided to do we had one in 2022. We had almost 100 people put in for that, submit for it. So what we did is we're combining 2023 and 2024. So we just had some delays getting approvals through the system, but everything is up and ready to go. The tool has been operational the whole time. So if you entered something in 2023 and you don't have any changes to make, we will accept that. If you want to go in and make some changes, you're absolutely more than welcome to do so. But for the 2023-2024 period, we're just making one 2-year assessment cycle, basically. So again, the tool is online and ready to go. Next slide. So just a couple of quick updates. I guess this is the commercial section. So we are doing a training and a kickoff for this year's self-assessment for the 2023-2024 period. So we will have another NOCoE webinar August 20th for this TIM cycle. And we'll go through and demonstrate the tool. It basically works exactly like it did before with quite a few enhancements to make it easier. Next slide. So a couple of the things that are in there, there you go. So the period of the assessment will run formally from September 3rd through November 30th. So you've got some time to get that done this year. Basically, you can get your stuff done between those dates. But again, the system is online and running right now if you want to attempt to do it. If you did an assessment last year, basically you can go in and pull that up and make updates to that and resubmit it for this period. And so if you did one in 2022, or if you wanted to update one from 2023, you can go in there and just pull that back up and make changes to it. Just a reminder from the previous presentation. So Crash Responder Safety Week is the week of November 18th. So we'll be making a hard push at the end of Crash Responder Safety Week to try to get these assessments done. If you did nothing else for Crash Responder Safety Week, at least do an assessment of your program. That'll be one of the check boxes for this year. Next slide. So same link as last year, the self-assessment.fhwa.trafficincidentmanagement.net. You can register if you haven't done it before. You can register for a new account. If you try to get into your previous and cannot get into the account, you don't have to create a new one. There is a reset password function on there. So just click password forgotten and it'll take you through that requirement. And again, we're doing the training coming up on the 20th, but you know, if you have any questions in the meantime, do hit that that contact down at the bottom, the FHWA-TIM-SA@battelle.org. Battelle is leading the effort. AECOM is supporting the FHWA team on this. So last slide. So this is basically your team. So you can hit Paul Jodoin. He's leading this effort. Myself, Brian Purvis, Greg Bumgardner, Nate Clark, and Martha Eady from Battelle. But again, if you hit that email link down at the bottom, that'll basically send an email to all of us. That's your quickest and most efficient way to get any assistance or questions answered on that. So with that, we look forward to getting your surveys this year and look forward to hearing from you on the August 20th webinar. So I appreciate it, Joe. Thanks.
Hey, outstanding. Thank you. Thank you, Brian, and Katie and Vishali. So our updates are complete. And just another reminder that this session will is being recorded and will be available on the NOCoE site. So if you're missing something, didn't get your pen up in time, all right, you can always go back and grab it. As I mentioned earlier, today's focus is on the EDC-7 Next Gen TIM technology of unmanned aerial systems, UAS. And I had mentioned earlier that we have a great Texas team with us here today to talk about their experience and their programs. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring up our first speaker, Aaron Fritch. Aaron, got that next slide, I believe. Yeah, get him set up. Yeah, there we go. Right. So for the past 2 years, Aaron Fritch has served as captain of the UAS operations for the Texas Department of Public Safety Aircraft Operations Division. He's been a part of 107 operators since 2017. Accumulated roughly 200 flight hours. He spent the first 17 years of his career in highway patrol, rising to oversee the collision reconstruction program. So welcome, Aaron, and thank you so much for being here. And take it away, pal.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate y'all. So, you know, like Joe said, what Jason and I are going to talk about today is kind of a brief from what we discussed at EDC-7. So, you know, you think about a 2-day workshop, there was a lot of information that was presented by a group of us, but we're going to kind of condense it down to a couple 20-minute sessions. So, you know, first of all, for those of y'all that weren't a part of EDC-7, just to kind of give everybody a background of Texas DPS's unmanned operations, just kind of go through a little bit of what we do and what our program looks like. So Texas DPS's unmanned aircraft operations, we're arguably the largest public safety UAS program in the country. Our program is overseen by our Aircraft Operations Division, and there's 6 divisions of our agency that actually operate UAS, and those are the divisions you see there on the screen. Next slide. So to kind of give you a brief rundown of our program, kind of where it started, where it's come to now, I won't go through the entire thing, but you know, the first documented use of UAS by our agency dated back into the mid-90s, where our FHWA patrol were actually utilizing remote controlled fixed wing aircraft with 35mm cameras attached to it with a remote shutter to document crash scenes. So, you know, they were actually utilizing some sort of traffic incident management, you know, all the way back there to quickly document these scenes from overhead. Kind of fast forwarding to where our program started in 2017. That's where we really started developing the SOPs and the policies for our program, kind of figuring out what UAS was going to, how UAS was going to be a part of Texas DPS. And as technology advanced, as the agency saw the benefits and all the different types of missions that we operate in, you can see how the program kind of exploded over about a 2 to 3 year period to kind of where we are now. Next slide. So where we are now, like I said, you know, the largest public safety operation in the country. We've got about 300, and that number varies from month to month because of retirements and promotions, things of that nature. But currently we're about 320 pilots within the program, and with the expectation of about another 60 pilots being added by the end of this year. We've got about 370 aircraft within our fleet, and that ranges everywhere from, you know, just small indoor type you know, DJI Avatas and things of that nature, all the way up to large fixed wing VTOL aircraft such as the Altair Dragonfish, and just about everything in between, because as you can imagine, public safety, we have many different mission sets that we operate in. There's not really a one size fits all. So we've got a variety of different airframes. Next slide. But what really sets us apart within our program is our operational tempo. For example, I don't know if you saw in some of the previous slides, the number of flights total within the program, but this is just a snapshot of last year. For example, last year we flew almost 52,000 flights, which averaged, you know, almost 1,000 drone flights per week, accumulated over 12,000 flight hours. So not only do we have a lot of equipment, a lot of people, but we're out there operating constantly day in and day out. There's hardly ever a time during the day when we don't have a drone up in the air for some sort of public safety mission. Next slide. And when we think about those missions, you know, within public safety, there's a lot of different things that we do, right? Everything from accident reconstruction, border operations. You know, we have over 1,200 miles of border with Mexico. So as everybody's aware, obviously there's a lot of things going on the southern border. So about 60% of our flights every month are related to some sort of border security operation. But you know, you see all the different types of operations that we're out there conducting, but really that number 2 mission, aside from border operations, is accident reconstruction. It's utilizing UAS for traffic incident management to actually get out there and document these scenes from overhead. Next slide. So one of the topics that was a big point in EDC 7 was UAS training. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. And it's really about how do you train your operators to be proficient, to be skilled at what they're doing out there. And this is kind of how we've done it within our program. As you can imagine, with a program of our size, you have to have a very professional training program for your pilots. And what we've done is we've built a training program that's kind of a multi-level approach. Obviously, starting out with our initial RPIC training, This is what all of our pilots go through. It's a 5-day 0 to hero course, which we call it, taking everybody from most of them never operated a drone before in their lives to being a proficient operator at the end of that 5-day class, and having accumulated roughly about 10 flight hours, actual hands-on experience by the end of that training. And we've got some other training classes, more advanced training classes that they go to once they start becoming more experienced in the field, such as the nighttime thermal course that we do, an ambient lighting class for our highway patrol operators that are out there documenting collision scenes at nighttime, so that they understand how to do that, to capture good imagery at nighttime using different lighting methods. We've got an advanced ARPIC school that we're developing out right now that we're fixing to start putting on, that's going to incorporate payload deployments and indoor operations and some DFR type operations. And then we hold our own PIX4D training for our highway patrol operators for collision reconstruction. It's a 5-day class that trains all of our folks on once they capture those images and understand how to properly capture those images at one of these types of scenes, how to process those properly in PIX4D, which is our photogrammetry software that we utilize within the agency, and then how to incorporate that final product into our CAD software for our final scale diagram. Next slide. So when we talk about our training program and really, a good way to train our pilots, it's kind of a 4-pronged approach, starting with education, then training them, validating them, and then assessing their skills. So, when we think about education, it's all that classroom material, right? So we've pulled a lot of that out from the in-person training and put it into online modules to be able to spend a lot more time in an online session, as opposed to having your pilots come to in person when they really want to be out there flying and understanding how to operate those aircraft. They don't want to spend that time in the classroom looking at a PowerPoint. So a lot of our education comes before the 5-day class in order to spend a lot of time on that information. And then, of course, the in-person is all that training that we're doing, whether it be scenario-based training or NIST, working on NIST, which we'll talk about here in just a second, and then validating those skills through different types of scenarios that we put them in outside of just the basic training scenarios. We do some large-scale scenarios that they're tasked with at the end of the course, that they have to be able to run on their own to prove that they've kind of mastered those skills that we've taught them. And then that final assessment is testing them at the end to make sure that they understand or are proficient at the operation of that aircraft. Next slide. So I talked about those online modules. This is kind of how we've broken it up into 5 different online modules for our personnel, going through the different administrative functions of the program, going through the different operations, safety management, and then obviously maintenance is a big thing with a program of our size. Especially related to public safety is drone laws. I teach a class on enforcing drone laws as part of the online modules, so that they understand how to deal with not necessarily our operations, but how to deal with the civilian operators that are out there flying that may be posing a risk to either our operations or public safety as a whole while they're doing other types of operations, or just complaints that may come in from the public that, hey, there's a drone flying over my backyard spying on me, so that our officers understand how to deal with those situations. And then that last module that we talk about is our simulator training. Before our pilots even come to touch a drone for the first time in person, they spend time on a drone simulator, teaching them the basic skills of flying the aircraft. Because once they understand, how the sticks control the aircraft through a simulator, up, down, left, right, manipulating the camera, once they've understood those skills, it really cuts down that learning curve when they get to in-person training. So we don't have to spend a lot of time focusing on those basic maneuvers. So that's really been a game changer in our program is incorporating the simulator training into that to cut down on that learning curve. Next slide. So I talked about NIST. For those of y'all that aren't familiar, NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They've got their standard test methods. You'll see down there in the bottom corner that QR code. You can scan that QR code. That'll take you to their webpage that really goes through all the different components of NIST. Gives you a really good understanding of what it is and the different tests that test methods that they do. But one of the benefits to this is that the simulator we use, which is Zephyr, it has the NIST test lanes built into it. So we can actually put our pilots through the NIST test lanes in the simulator to start building that muscle memory. We utilize NIST also in the in-person training to really enhance their skills on manipulating that aircraft. It's all metric based, so you have a way to score their abilities, score their abilities in operating that aircraft through repeatable metrics, and it's scalable as well. So depending on what aircraft that you operate, all the way from just a small quadcopter all the way up to a larger VTOL, these test methods are scalable throughout each of those different types of airframe. Depending on what you're utilizing. And then of course we utilize it for our final proficiency on our operators, and then also their annual recurrency that they're required to go through at the end of each year. Next slide. So the other component of the training program is scenario-based training. So some of the misconceptions out there is that people say, well, NIST isn't a good way to train your pilots. Well, only using NIST obviously is not the best way to do it, but incorporating NIST into your training program is a good start for teaching somebody the basic flight skills, how to manipulate that aircraft. But once you get outside of that, you then need to start looking at scenario-based training, right? How do you train your pilots for your specific type of operation? And this is what we've done with ours. We've got 5 different scenarios that we utilize within our training program that are real world scenarios. These are scenarios that we have actually done in the real world. Whether it be looking for a missing person, whether it be searching for a suspect, dealing with overwatch in a tactical type situation. So they're all real world type scenarios that we put them through in a training environment. And it's not only to teach them how to accomplish that mission, but it's building that muscle memory throughout that training scenario on all the different components that they need to understand, putting them through role-based training, because flying a drone is not just about the pilot out there flying, it's all those different components of airspace deconfliction and communication with your different pilots using that crew resource management. So all of our pilots, they go through each of these different roles as they go through the training scenarios. And it's also about productivity, right? So when we think about training a pilot, it's not about just, racking up a lot of flight hours and say, hey, I've got, 20 flight hours training. It's actually being productive during that training. It's having a task that you're trying to accomplish, right? Giving them a mission and saying, go accomplish this mission, rather than just flying around at 400 feet burning holes in the sky. Next slide. So kind of transitioning from the training component into traffic incident management and kind of how we utilize UAS within our program for TIM. So next slide. So obviously, the biggest component of this in public safety is collision investigation, right? So actually out there with motor vehicle crashes, trying to incorporate TIM's into those collision investigations. And then, of course, we'll talk about UAS in that as well. But obviously, our goals, right, that everybody knows when it comes to TIMs, right, safe, quick clearance of the roadways, trying to reduce the possibility of those secondary collisions, and that increase safety for our first responders that are out there. So really, you know, how do we utilize UAS for this? Next slide. So historically, right, these are the things that we used to use, or sometimes still use, when it comes to the mapping and the documentation of crash scenes, right? Historically, it started out with you know, tape measures, right? Using those baselines and Cartesian coordinate system to document those scenes with those tape measures. And the problems with that, obviously, it's time consuming. There's a safety component to that because you've got officers that are walking around through your scene. You've got to shut down the roadway to be able to do this. It's really time consuming on the back end on actually drawing these scenes out, utilizing those measurements. We kind of transitioned as time went on, and we got additional funding into the use of total stations. Obviously, that's takes a little bit less time, you know, less personnel. Sometimes you didn't have to shut the roadway down completely in order to do that. But you know, as we talk about sometimes, is you're actually out there playing Frogger with a prism pole, dodging traffic, which obviously is a safety concern for your personnel. Costs a little bit more for these, obviously, than tape measures, but you get a little bit better end product with the use of CAD software now with the total station data. And then obviously moving into laser scanners, depending on your agency, your program, whether you have the funding for these, obviously they're a lot more expensive, but sometimes took a little bit less time. You get a lot better final product out of them, but it's really heavy on the training component, especially on the post-processing work within that software. Next slide. So just kind of, you know, some good illustrations of what we're talking about here, right? This is a couple of our troopers from back in the day, right? Documenting a crash scene with the use of tape measures. Next slide. And this is kind of the work product that you would end up with in a collision investigation. You know, took a lot of time to put these together for the investigator, a lot of time with a traffic template trying to draw these out to scale, but you can sometimes get a fairly good end product. Next slide. And then of course that transition into total stations with collision investigation. So next slide. And with that, right, you get a little bit better end product utilizing that CAD software. But once again, you know, it's a good representation for taking measurements and things of that nature, but it's really not a good visual representation of what that scene looked like, right? You're still dealing with, you know, just some line work through CAD software, some symbols that you're putting in there. It's not a really good, you know, visual representation. It really doesn't put somebody into that scene. Next slide. And that's kind of where laser scanners came in, right? Once again, you know, it takes a little bit more time, but next slide. You end up with a product in the end that's a better visual representation of what that scene looks like through the utilization of that point cloud. Next slide. So that's kind of where UAS comes into the picture, right? So over the last probably 5-6 years, UAS has kind of been a go-to for collision investigations, and this is really the reason why that you see there on the screen is one is that time savings. So what used to take, you know, hours to go out there and document one of these scenes, and not to mention the hours that sometimes it would take for the post-processing to come up with something that's a good work product in the end. But what took hours to document out there on scene now takes sometimes 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes of actual flying with a drone to document, especially some of these larger crash scenes. And of course, that increased safety. right? So your first responders, they don't have to be out there, out in the road with a prism pole or, going out there, moving in and out of traffic. You don't have to shut down that traffic, the roadway traffic for extended period of time, because everything you're doing is from overhead. Once you set up your for us, ground control points in the scene, once you have that stuff set up, everything that you're doing is with that drone overhead. So it's definitely an increase, increases safety for our first responders. And then of course cuts down on the amount of people that you need, because, honestly, you just need one operator out there with your drone to be able to fly this. And then everything else you're doing is post-processing, which, with that post-processing, it's the quality of that end product, right? So utilizing photogrammetry software, we're still able to produce a accurate 2-scale diagram, forensic diagram of that scene, which is obviously what you're fixing to see is a lot better visual representation, especially when we're talking about the potential of criminal cases where you're trying to present this to a jury and you want them to actually be in that scene. You want them to understand what that scene really looked like out there, on the roadway. Next slide. So this is just a good example. If you'll go ahead and play that. This is just a good example of a fly-through of a fatality crash scene. This is one that we had a couple of years ago out of West Texas. Two vehicle, actually 3 vehicle, because that one of the vehicles was towing a trailer. But all of this was done with just a drone, and it's just flying that drone overhead, capturing the required images, utilizing the required parameters to make sure you get good images with good overlaps, and everything post-processing through Pix4D. You're able to produce this 2-scale diagram that is, just an amazing visual representation that puts the viewer actually in that scene. Next slide. And then what we're able to do, like I talked about before, we take those final products from Pix4D, that 2D orthomosaic. We're able to incorporate that into our CAD software, put in all of our measurements, be able to show that this is a 2-scale diagram, and any other line work, any other, text boxes, things like that, labeling that we need to do is all on top of that 2D orthomosaic. Next slide. And then, of course, the other component of this is nighttime operations. Obviously not all of our crash scenes happen in daylight hours, obviously. So it's understanding how to go out there and actually document these crash scenes during low light or nighttime situations. So obviously, when you're conducting these nighttime flights, it obviously takes a lot more patience, right? It takes a little bit more time with the setup of the scene, ensuring you have proper lighting, ensuring that your camera settings are set properly so you get good usable quality images that you can put into your photogrammetry software. And obviously it takes a lot more training of your pilots to understand how to fly these aircraft and how to capture this data in these types of environments. Next slide. So when we think about, scene lighting, you've got to be able to put some sort of lighting out there and to be able to see what you're capturing an image of. And this is just some of the examples of some of the different types of lighting that we use, everywhere from, as you'll see there in the middle on the left, just utilizing that downward landing light on a lot of these aircraft that they have, flying at lower altitudes, can sometimes provide enough illumination, depending on the intensity of that light, in order to gather enough of that data with those photographs. And then, of course, it's everything else, right? From takedown lights and headlights throughout the scene to portable lighting, even, some of the stuff that you'll see on some of your fire apparatuses, and then even just your street lights can provide enough illumination, as long as you understand how to manipulate those camera settings you know, to open up that aperture, longer shutter setting, shutter speeds, things of that nature, to capture good imagery. Next slide. So what you'll see there, that's the exact same scene that you saw the fly through a minute ago. That crash actually happened at night. They flew that scene 2 different times, one during the nighttime that you see here on the screen, and then the other one they flew during the daylight hours. So you see with the addition of some scene lighting, adjusting those camera settings, you still end up with a really good quality product that you can use in you know, quarter for visual representation for whatever you need it for. Next slide. So the last thing I'll talk about in my segment is tethered drones, and kind of how we've started to incorporate the use of tethered drones into public safety. Next slide. So really the first time that we started incorporating tether is with our capital operations downtown Austin. We've got about 46 square blocks of area in downtown Austin. That's our capital complex that our agency has the responsibility for security, which is where our Capitol building and all of our state buildings are at. So we've got full-time pilots that are down there that are doing operations for security purposes. And one of the things that we always deal with is protest and large operations and large events that are occurring down in that area. And it's, you know, how do you actually cover those areas without the need of, you know, multiple aircraft, multiple pilots actually being up and down for battery changes constantly. And that's where tethered drones came in. And this is really where we really started first utilizing them. And you know, we've strategically placed drones on tethers on the north and south side of our Capitol building, on top of buildings, which allows us to have a wide coverage area and that can operate for hours on end without having to bring those aircraft down. So you're dealing with an uninterrupted live video stream during these types of situations. Next slide. So the kind of the second phase of this is a kind of a proof of concept that we're working on right now. This is one of our newest vehicles that we have within our fleet, all electric Ford Lightning, that's been equipped right now with a photo kite that's a 150-foot tether. Obviously, you know, with an electric vehicle, everything that we're running on that is running directly off of the battery power within that vehicle. You can see some of the numbers there at the bottom, which what we've seen currently is, you know, we're getting about an hour of flight time per 1% of battery drain on that vehicle. And that's also running a lot of other components within that vehicle, such as a Starlink and all of the different computers and displays that we have built into that vehicle. And then, of course, you know, some future upgrades we're looking at is some RF detection, remote ID receivers for situational awareness of what other type of aircraft are operating within our area of operation. But, you know, one of the things that we're looking at for this is different types of operations that we can incorporate this into. And, you know, disaster response obviously is one of those types of situations, but also, you know, that traffic incident management type of situation where you're dealing with you know, a large event. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. You know, things like what you see here on the screen, right? You have these large pileups, you have these large, you know, traffic situations where you're going to be out there for an extended duration, right? You need to be able to provide coverage of what's going on, what the progress is for that situation. And it's not only for those boots on the ground, it's also for the command staff back, you know, that's you know, in an EOC or back in their office or wherever they're at, to be able to see exactly what's going on during the situation in an uninterrupted live stream. So that's the things that these tethered drones can do for you during these types of situations. So next slide. So that's kind of where I'll end in my segment. My information right there on the screen. You can always reach out to me at that email address. Be more than welcome to answer any questions, through that email, but I think we're also going to have a little Q&A segment here at the end after Jason gives his presentation. So with that, I'll pass it back along to you, Joe.
Hey, outstanding. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate it, man. You can hear the passion in your voice and the expertise. I sense you dig it. You're
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely right. Good stuff, right? So thank you so much for that. And
Yeah, thank you.
hey, if you need any assistance now, you know who to call, right? Hey, at this point, I'm gonna bring one. I want to bring one Jason Day. He's the director of unmanned aircraft at the Texas DPS. Wealth of experience, 27-year tenure, military, civilian, public safety, aviation. He's a national expert in the UAS community. Serves numerous UAS working groups and boards and oversees one of the largest public safety UAS programs in the nation with over 300 remote pilots and unmanned aircraft. So welcome, Jason, and you've got the show.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk about a couple different topics here, but they're all fairly related. And we're going to kind of start with DFR and see how that goes into the TIMS concept and the overall UAS program. So we can move to the next slide, please. So this is the hot word in the UAS public safety community right now. Most of you have probably heard of DFR, drone as a first responder. After DFR was DFR 2.0. Nowadays, DFR is kind of standing for drone for a first responder. So it takes on different iterations as the technology advances and more advanced operations come online and things like that. But really, this all kind of started in Chula Vista. Next slide. And the point of a DFR program initially was to allow Chula Vista officers to be able to respond to 911 calls with the drones very rapidly. Fairly short range, right? Chula Vista is not the largest place in the entire world, but it does have a pretty good size to it. So they were using the drones to respond to 911 calls within a 1 to 2 mile radius. And they're still doing it today. It's a very professional program. Sometimes it's completely manual when they're up on the rooftops and they're manually flying the aircraft, but they can also do this through remote operations where you have somebody in a command center, they're operating the drone, and they'll have a visual observer on the rooftop, just checking the airspace. Most of the time, these DFR flights are relatively low altitude, just over whatever the highest altitude that you need not to run into buildings. You don't see a whole lot of DFR programs operating, up in the 400-foot range, because that doesn't do you a whole lot of good. Because really the purpose of this is to provide that real-time situational awareness to the boots on the ground that are responding to whatever that 911 call is. Next slide. So the kind of things that they'll respond to is if there's a crash, any type of assaults, missing persons, wanted subject, fires, EMS, in progress crimes, commercial alarms, and patrol backup. Next slide. And just for full transparency, a lot of this information I actually pulled from Pearland and the Law Enforcement Drone Association. So we do a lot of things with them, and they provided some of their slides. So that's where I got some of these pictures and things. But you can see here's probably the two most professional DFR programs right now. As I mentioned, Chula Vista, they have anywhere from 300 to 500 DFR flights every single month. And they've really figured out how to do this very effectively. Pearland took all of the things that Chula Vista learned, and they incorporated some other technologies, and then they took it to that next level, where you can kind of see that map with all those circles on there. Those circles represent their flight areas, but it also represents areas that they have a secondary piece of technology called called Iris Automation or the Cassia G. It's basically a camera system. that can see a 2-mile visual envelope around each location that it's installed at. And instead of having to have a physical person on that rooftop as the visual observer, they utilize that camera system to comply with the see and avoid requirements from the FAA. And the FAA went out to Pearland, they went to these locations, they got with the manufacturer of the cameras, and for daytime operations, that has been completely signed off to be able to do these remote type of operations without a visual observer. Pearland also utilizes drone in a box technology, where they're able to launch that drone remotely. When it's done, it comes back, it lands in that box, and it stays there, recharges until the next time that they need to utilize it. Next slide. So that kind of takes us right into what we're doing here in the Austin area. And this is kind of more applies to the TIMS concept, or also what we call drone as a service. Next slide. So imagine you run a public safety agency and you're not as big as DPS and you don't have a huge budget. All of this kind of technology gets very expensive and it's very labor intensive. You have to buy the drones, you have to buy the props, you have to do batteries, you need some type of vehicle or a way to charge these things. People have to go out and do maintenance, do pre-flight checks, all of these different pieces to run a safe UAS program. What if instead all of these public safety agencies could come together and say, hey, we're going to strategically place drones in areas where there's a lot of activity, and whoever needs the drone at that time can log in and fly this remotely. That's now drone as a service, where multiple entities are leveraging that technology. It dramatically reduces those costs to each of those agencies, and it dramatically reduces the labor required to perform those operations, because this is where a really good public-private partnership comes into play, where instead of each agency going out there doing the pre-flight inspections, doing the maintenance, maintaining the drone in a box, all of that stuff, that's done by the private sector, whoever owns those locations or those drones. And public safety then just leverages that technology. And for this kind of circumstance, when I'm saying public safety, I'm including DOTs because they're another player in all of this. So this map here, a couple of these slides are actually from the Autonomy Institute. We work with them here in Austin, but we have a toll road that runs down the east side of Austin. It's called the 130 toll. And along this project, it's going to be kind of an autonomous center and testing ground, right? And along this, about every mile and a half, there would be a drone in a box. Next slide. And how these drones would work is any public safety agency that needed to utilize that drone at that moment would be able to log in and use it. Whether, let's say there's a crash at one of the intersections. Law enforcement can log in, they can launch the drone, they can go out, they can get situational awareness, and they can map it. All those images would upload, and then they could process them. An hour later, there's a fire in the median of the highway. Fire department could log in, launch the drone, it could go over, they could get situational awareness on that fire, they could direct firefighters, that could get put out. An hour later, TxDOT would be able to log in, leverage that drone, for some type of inspection, bridge, traffic incident management, whatever the use case is. And then these drones could also be used by the private sector. Now, there's a lot of things that have to come to fruition for this to happen. You need, MOUs and agreements between not just all the different agencies, but the private entities. But this is something that we're working on right now. Next slide. But to be able to do all of this, you have to have some core infrastructure in place. First of all, you have to have the drones in a box. You have to have reliable drones that are easy to operate, that have all the camera specs. But you have to have network infrastructure along this entire corridor. So part of that is this this PINS project, where they would be these, think of it as like a light tower, right? But it's modular components that allow all the other technologies to work together. There would be one module in there for 5G. There would be a Starlink module in there. There would be drone detection module in there. There would be airspace awareness like remote ID or drone detection in there. There would be some type of camera system for looking out for manned aviation. All of these things would exist. And in this PIN, all of these components, again, are modular. So as we move to 6G, you just pull out that module, but the core infrastructure, the tower stays there, and you can upgrade it as you need to. And that is what enables all these other tools to talk to each other so that you can get the first responders the information that they need. Next slide. And here's the neat thing, right? And here's kind of a visualization about how all of this is going to work with the data exchange and all the different entities. There's a big emergency operations center being built at the end of this corridor. But along this corridor, what makes this project so unique is how many big players already exist on the 130 highway or tollway. We have Amazon distribution centers. We have the Tesla Gigafactory. We have the Clean Energy Tech Center. So those entities would be responsible for helping fund a lot of this and maintaining all of that equipment. And it's great that public safety just gets to utilize and leverage this for the common good, because it's good for these companies as well. You know, if there's a large fire at Tesla, they don't have to have a bunch of drones and infrastructure to work that fire. They're going to utilize the fire department, and the fire department can use those drones that Tesla is maintaining for them and the rest of public safety. So it's really about that partnership, that interoperability, and that working together for everybody's best interest. Next slide. But the other big part of all of this is not just the connectivity to the aircraft and all the network to make this happen, but it's what's being done on the back end. And a lot of this is going to utilize AI. And as soon as you have all these network devices, you also have to worry about the risk of cyber concerns, right? So we're going to just briefly talk about AI and cyber risks. We're going to talk about identifying those risks, managing those risks, and communicating those risks to stakeholders. Next slide. So when we talk about some of these risks, you know, AI, it's obviously the buzzword. It has a huge play in the drone world. You know, just to be, if you've never done any type of drone operations, and we tell all of our pilots this when they go through RPIC school, the first 5 minutes of a drone mission is fun and sexy, and you know, you're the cool guy, you're out there doing great work. After 5 minutes, it's work, right? Especially when you have long duration events or tethered drone operations, it gets very boring very quickly, and complacency sets in very quickly, because who's going to stare at a screen for hours on end? So this is where we can use AI. Right? We can have different triggers. We can have it do a lot of the manual processes and take away some of that complacency. However, we're not really to a point where there is enough models to allow that to happen completely with the human out of the loop. We're still to a point where there's a lot of false positives, false identifications. You know, you may be looking for a fire or looking for little Timmy that's wearing a red shirt, and it's going to give you a bunch of information, and now you're having to filter it, and your brain is actually now having to do more work than before. You also have the risk of over relying on the technology, thinking that it's just going to be, you know, the magic pill, and you can just kick back, you hit the launch button, and it's going to do all the other stuff. And it's just not there yet, right? And then that loss of human in the loop is a huge thing, because regardless of how safe and how reliable the aircraft is, there are going to be times when things go sideways. And when you have lost the ability to actually manually fly the aircraft or lost the skills to do that, when something does go sideways, it's going to take you a lot longer to recover, and probably something bad's going to happen. So we have to think about all those risks when we're incorporating the AI into these kinds of situations. You also have to think about, the cyber risks. When Teslas became pretty prolific, you would have hackers that would sit on top of overpasses trying to hack cars, right? Or they would go through a parking lot and they would try to hack into the computers and take over the cars. We've all seen movies where, the Teslas just start driving themselves and start crashing and stuff. A lot of that is, overblown, but it's a serious risk. And we have to think about nefarious entities trying to, when you have a bunch of network drones trying to log in and take control of all of that technology, especially when you're dealing with, Amazon and Tesla and all these other entities where there may be some type of criminal organization that wants information. And that's going to ultimately lead to a compromised mission, and you're not going to have the data you need to provide to those boots on the ground. And then, I'm a data nerd. I'm an administrator. I bang at the keyboard all day. Anytime you have any type of those cyber issues, you're going to have some type of inaccurate record keeping. And, that's not as important as the operational stuff, but it's something to consider in your risk mitigation strategy. Next slide. We've all seen, the headlines for China bad and bans on Chinese manufacturers. And that's all based on, a lot of these perceived cyber risks that are out there right now. So we need to be able to figure out a way to manage all of this and do it safely now, and think about what's going to happen in the future. Next slide. So to be able to manage all of these risks, first thing we need to do is we need to start building larger data sets. And this is where, it's hard for a small agency or even a small state that doesn't do a whole lot of UAS operations. They probably just don't have a lot of data. So they're going to need to work with all of their partners to combine this data and put it in some type of model to see how secure that all of that data actually is. You got to build redundancy into all of your policies. Just because you think one strategy is going to work, where it works for your IT department, does not necessarily mean it's going to work for your UAS program or your UAS TIMS program. But ultimately, just like laptop cybersecurity, it all comes down to your remote pilots. Are they managing their local devices that they have? Because they're the ones that were responsible most of the time for the firmware updates and the software on the controllers and the drone maintenance and all of those things. And that's where that security level really starts. So they have to be aware, they have to be trained on that to manage it at that local level. And then on the cyber side, this is where we mitigate the threat of non-American or Chinese drones or all of that through really good, robust cyber policies. We don't ever fly with the manufacturer's software. We always use a third-party cyber vetted software platform. Our software platform is actually based here in Texas in the Austin area. They've been vetted by our cyber department, the state's the Department of Information Resources, Texas Military Department, all of these different entities. So we know that our data is secure with them. We also do off-agency network for firmware and software updates on the actual devices, because that is software from the manufacturer. So how do you manage that risk of making sure that that manufacturer cannot access any of your sensitive department information? Well, you just do it off network, right? You either have dirty internet, Wi-Fi pucks, or some other type, other source of internet connection that's not going to touch your network whatsoever. But again, you have to get your cyber division involved in all of these processes because they have been trained. They know how to look for this kind of risk. Next slide. And the last part of this that I've kind of alluded to is it really takes a community to come together to talk about all of this. Because if Texas DPS finds some vulnerability, we need to tell everybody else about it so that everybody else can look for that same vulnerability, right? So you have to go out, you have to have good collaboration, you have to build these public-private partnerships. You have to go to conferences and summits. Captain Fritch and I, we go to every event that we could possibly find and just talk to everybody we know and go out there. You know, our saying is hugs and high fives. We're all about building that bigger community because it makes us all a whole lot stronger and a whole lot safer. Next slide. So that's all my contact information. I'll throw it in the chat or just screenshot that. But I am going to give you a quick QR code after this. In December of this year, we, Captain Fritch and I, the Texas Department of Public Safety, host a Public Safety Drone Expo. Next slide. And it is free for public safety or government or DoD employees to come to. We'll have lots of vendors there. There will be industry sessions on cyber and advanced air mobility and UTM and FAA and NASA and all of this stuff. So if you are in Texas or you feel like coming to Texas, you can sign up right there. We also offer a couple days of training. One of those training blocks is actually a photogrammetry session where you get to learn how to go out with the drone and fly crash scenes. So just take a look at that. If that's something you're interested, we'll welcome you to Texas. Thank you, everybody.
Outstanding. Great presentation. Another passionate UAS person. We love it, right? Good job, Jason. We appreciate your time. So with the limited time that we have left, let's get to some of these questions, I think. What do you say, Vishali, huh? I want to take a look at, and I've got the questions that were just sent to me. Hey, Jason, while you're still there, how does technology or policy for drone in a box deal with competing requests or interest for multiple responses to the same incident?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is the first thing once we are ready to go live with this that we have to figure out. And there's going to have to be like a prioritization tree to be able to decide who gets control over that aircraft during a certain scene. It's also about strategic placement of the assets, because imagine with the camera technology that exists, you don't necessarily need to be right up on a scene a lot of the times. So if you may have somebody who needs the drone to be right up on the scene, maybe that's the fire department, and they want to get in there close, they want to get in there with the thermal camera, but you also, law enforcement wants to log in, launch the drone, and get, big view. That could be a secondary drone that's a mile away that maybe moves in a little bit closer. But with some of the zoom cameras that we have on our drones now, they can see 2 miles away, right? So you don't necessarily have to prioritize that one single drone. You can leverage many of these at the same time, especially because you're going to have some type of beyond visual line of sight waiver already. And the range on these aircraft is miles and miles. So imagine, just because you have one in one spot, you probably have 3 or 4 there that you can leverage at any moment.
Great. Yep. Understood. Yeah. Good deal. Aaron, Cap, you still with us? And this one for UAS, UAS for crash reporting documentation, any legal or court issues with the RPIC not being law enforcement conducting the flight as it pertains to evidence chain of custody?
Most of the time, honestly, I don't know of really any agencies that utilize pilots that are not law enforcement or not part of their agency. So, you know, I really can't speak to, you know, what others may do, but I can tell you as far as the chain of custody goes, as long as you can have good documentation of that chain of custody for those photographs, whoever was a part of that operation, you know, if you have a non-commissioned person that is working with law enforcement to capture these images, as long as you have the chain of custody that you can document between that person's capturing of the images and then turning them over to law enforcement, there shouldn't be any issues there. But as far as I know, most of the law enforcement that's capturing this stuff is doing it with their own personnel. So,
Gotcha. Hey, and here's one for both of you. You guys can fight it out, right? With tethered drones and drones as a service, where the use is not a response to a specific incident or threat, how do you manage this in a way that protects privacy and limits the possibility of misuses of the technology?
yes, so that kind of goes back to your agency policy, right? So what is the policy you've developed for your pilots? We've got a fairly robust policy for our personnel as far as imagery is concerned. And it's also understanding, you know, how you're utilizing that aircraft, right? Are you utilizing it for, you know, some sort of tactical overwatch? Or are you trying to steer more towards surveillance, which we try not to do any of. We try to stay completely away from you know, quote unquote surveillance of people or locations. But you know, most of the time what we're doing is just, you know, random overwatch of areas that are public areas, right? So there are areas where there's not a reasonable expectation of privacy when you're standing out on a you know, public roadway or the front lawn of the Capitol building, right? So, you know, we've got most of the time cameras all over the place that are fixed on the sides of buildings or poles or whatever. It's no different than if it was a drone flying. You know, it's still capturing that same information from overhead. You know, of a area that is you know, open to the public, right? You don't have really a reasonable expectation of privacy standing out on that public area. But then it also goes back to, you know, are you even capturing images, right? Are you even capturing any data, or are you just doing, you know, overwatch, not recording anything, just looking at a live stream coming through, just to ensure that there's nothing that's going on in that area?
Gotcha.
I also want to say with that is it's about creating a culture of professionalism and accountability, right? And so there's a TV behind me that runs our video streaming software. Every time one of our drones launch in the state of Texas from DPS, it is live streamed, and there are our pilots know that somebody is always watching it. And in the very beginning, when we adopted this software platform, we had to do a culture shift because people would be out on deployment in a hotel room doing firmware updates in just their shorts, not realizing that it's live streaming to everybody out there, right? But now it's part of our core training structure to understand that somebody is always watching their drone video, and that really helps with accountability.
Gotcha. Yep. Good points. Hey, here's one more. Who controls the data that you obtained from a flight mission, and are you able to store it locally?
You want to answer that one, Jason?
No, you got
it.
So it's our data, obviously. Within any of our flights, all that data belongs to us. It's stored within our DroneSense software platform, and it belongs to us. You're muted, Joe.
I gotta get it unmuted. Too many buttons. Are we seeing anything else in the chat? I think we covered all the questions, didn't we, Vishali? Have you seen anything
There's
else?
one or two new questions that have come up. One
yeah.
was from Greg Pierce
Mhm.
that works with a small police department where they use the DJI Matrix 300 type drone, and they had limited training. Is there a class for this type of drone? I don't know if you guys would be familiar with that.
Well, so Greg, we've got a lot of resources. If you email me and Captain Fritch, we will share all of our training material. It's probably a little bit short notice, but next week in Houston, Texas, there is a public safety drone convention through the Airborne Public Safety Association. There's multiple days of training there, but then you can also, again, go to our drone expo in December, where there's a basic course, an advanced RPIC course, there's a unit manager course, there's that photogrammetry course, and you will get all that kind of instruction you're looking for. We have 3 daytime RPIC schools coming up this year and 2 nighttime RPIC schools. Any agency can request to come and audit the training program. During those schools, we don't train other agencies, but they can come, you can come and you can sit through the entire week, see how we build out of our training program, how we administer all of that, and then take, away all that material back to your own agency.
And Greg, because I think what you're talking about also is specifically learning to fly that aircraft better. I will tell you, I'm not familiar with a lot of others that would do specific training, like paid training or something of that nature for that specific airframe. But I can tell you that some of the best training you're going to get is going to be finding somebody else, another agency that is heavily utilizing that type of airframe and spending some time with them. We've utilized M300s frequently within our program. That's one of our airframes we currently still have. We've got operators with hundreds and hundreds of hours on that airframe. So finding another agency that's maybe in your area, or even reaching out to us that's got a lot of experience with that, and really maybe spending some time with them, or at least picking their brain on some the ins and outs of that particular airframe.
Deal. Good deal. I'm not seeing anything.
One
Go ahead.
final one, I don't know if we've covered this, is from Tony Casella. Do you guys have any guidance or suggestions for non-law enforcement agencies that would like to remotely operate a drone for traffic incident management, construction zones, or otherwise? They received notice from FAA that state policy didn't allow remote operated UAS. So not to respond to their state policy, but in Texas, how do you view that?
I don't know who you spoke to, but I know multiple fire departments that do drone as a first responder. Those are non-law enforcement. So I don't know any FAA rules. We do almost everything we do under 107. And 107 is not a law enforcement thing. Even a public aircraft operation, that's not a law enforcement aircraft operation. That's all public aircraft, right? Mm-hmm. So I can't think of a specific FAA regulation that is just about law enforcement specifically.
Very, very good point. So
Joe, if I may chime in on that one, there are multiple DOTs that are using the drones. There's a service patrol in Utah that all the service patrols use it. There are just numerous people, not extensively as law enforcement, of course, but there are great examples of the drones being used, by everybody, including transportation agencies.
Right.
And
Thanks,
if
Mark.
anybody needs a great contact with the FAA, send me or Aaron an email. We will put you in contact with the great and powerful Michael O'Shea up in DC. He will be your best friend, and he really helps out all of public safety and DOTs and anybody that needs to do public aircraft operations.
Outstanding. Okay. Well, clock on the wall says 3 p.m. here on the East Coast. So thank you, Jason and Aaron, and to our other speakers, and thanks for all that you do out there. It saves lives every single day. It's saving it while we're sitting here talking, I guarantee it. So stay Tim safe, and continue to promote and contact us here at FHWA if you need some assistance, advice, and we point you in the right direction or hook you up with the right folks. So thank you all so much for attending today, and please stay safe. See you next month. Thank you.